Thank you for joining us this week as we trace the steps of Christ through this Passion Week. And today we look at Christ at Simon the leper's house in Bethany. Christ had healed Simon and wanted to invite him to his house and also his disciples. And also he invited mutual friends of Mary and Martha and Lazarus, who Christ has raised from the dead. So this was quite the celebration that was going on in this house, celebrating resurrection of the dead and healing. And then in the midst of all of this, Mary does something that is very unusual. Let's go to our passage as we think about this today. Matthew chapter 26, verses 6 through 16. And when Jesus was in Bethany at the house of Simon the leper, a woman came to him having an alabaster flask of very costly fragrant oil, and she poured it on his head as he sat at the table. But when his disciples saw it, they were indignant, saying, "Why this waste? For this fragrant oil might have been sold for much and given to the poor." But when Jesus was aware of it, he said to them, "Why do you trouble the woman? For she has done a good work for me. For you have the poor with you always, but me you do not always have. For in pouring this fragrant oil on my body, she did it for my burial. Assuredly, I say to you, whenever the gospel is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will also be told as a memorial to her." Then one of the 12, called Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, "What are you willing to give me if I deliver him to you?" And they counted out to him 30 pieces of silver. So from that time, he sought opportunity to betray him. This account is recorded for us in the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and John. And by looking at all three passages, a lot of the details are filled in until we have a 3D view, so to speak, of this wonderful event. One thing is to not confuse this with a very similar event that's recorded for us in Luke chapter 7. This was earlier in Jesus' ministry. This was a different woman, a woman of a sinful reputation. And the results were different as well. In that instance, Christ forgave the woman for her sins. In this event of Mary anointing the body of Jesus, we see that she leaves a legacy of devotion. We learn important lessons from this act that Mary carried out towards Christ. And that is, first of all, that we see that she was willing to allow this very valuable object to be broken. This ointment oil was in an alabaster bottle. Alabaster is a crystallite gypsum type of rock. It's light in color. It's easily carved. And so this would have been a very beautiful bottle that the oil was in, but it had to be broken for that to be poured out on Jesus Christ. This is a lesson in that we have to be broken if we are to be poured out in devotion to Christ. We also see that it was very costly. This oil was estimated to be 300 denarii. A denarii is 1 day's wages for work. And this would be equivalent to an entire year of work. In our economy today, that'd be somewhere around $50,000. So very costly. And our worship of Jesus Christ needs to be a value. It needs to be something that costs us something. What are we willing to give in our devotion to Christ? We also see that Christ said that wherever the gospel would be repeated, that what this woman did would also be repeated with the gospel. And here we are in the year 2020, and once again, we're repeating what this woman did in devotion to Christ. One of the proofs of who Christ is who did he claim to be and how did people respond to that? The historian David McCullough, in his masterful work on John Adams, is careful to record accurately from the letters that were lovingly written between John Adams and his wife Abigail. He understood that the most accurate source of information are the contemporaries who know the person best. This was a person that knew Jesus Christ very well. And when Jesus Christ claimed to be the Son of God, his life backed it up. If you or I claim to be the Son of God, I think our family and closest friends would tell us to jump in the lake or have us committed. But when Christ said that he was the promised Messiah, when he said he was the Holy One, the Son of God, God himself, they did not argue with him. His life, his words, his love, all backed up those claims. Now you might say, well, what about others that didn't follow him? We do have recorded for us the response of Judas and actually all the disciples, and they said, what a waste of money. John tells us why. Because Judas had the wrong view of Christ. There it's recorded that he loved the money and was in charge of the treasury and would often help himself to the money. Or also in the Gospel of John, it goes on to record for us the response by the religious leaders. And they wanted to have him killed. In fact, they were at the same time arranging for him to be killed. And they said, we have to kill him because our place will be taken away, our place of affluence, our place of comfort, our place of credibility, to be able to have that affluence. We'd lose it all if Christ is who he claims to be, and so he must be killed. What do we learn from this beautiful account that's recorded for us in the Gospels? It teaches us that we need to live a life of devotion, a devotion that requires a brokenness on our part. Are we willing to surrender all to Christ? It is something that costs us much. Are we willing to give our all to Jesus Christ? And as we do that, it will fill our homes with a fragrance as we give praise to God. And we'll leave a legacy of praise for God. Now it's interesting because the Gospel of John goes on to say that there were many people outside the house who had come to see Lazarus because they heard that he was there and they had heard that he had risen from the dead. In fact, the religious leaders said, we're going to have to kill Lazarus as well. We have to get rid of this evidence of who Christ is. So we have three different groups with three different responses to Christ. We have Mary, who's just pouring out her devotion and love for Christ. We have Judas, who has a totally wrong view of who Jesus Christ is. And then we have the religious leaders who reject Jesus Christ. I wonder in this week of Passion, as we think about who is Jesus Christ to you, what does he mean to you? What is your response to Jesus Christ?